I'm author and critic David Agranoff. I'm a horror and science fiction author, critic, and researcher. In this podcast, I wanted to provide in-depth interviews and panel discussions with everyone from New York Times bestselling authors to researchers, musicians, and anyone I find interesting. Welcome to Postcards from a Dying World.
Time.
All right. Are we started?
Yeah, you could edit it any way you want.
Yep. Hey, we're in Bloomington, Indiana, my hometown, but it's also the hometown of Kathryn Janeway. Okay, so two sci-fi icons, of course, right? Well, but Kathryn Janeway, the whole reason why we have a statue here is because of the hard work of a lot of people, but in particular, Mary Beth and Peter here, who are one of the founders of the Janeway Collective. Can you tell the folks a little bit about how this statue happened, honoring the birthplace of Captain Janeway, who got the Voyager back home?
Well, we were on Star Trek Picard Three in 2019, and I introduced myself as being from Bloomington, Indiana, future home of Captain Kathryn Janeway. And the lady I was talking to said, "Do you have a statue there for her, like they do for Kirk in Iowa?" And I said, "Well, no, but we should have."
Yeah, we always can do things better than Iowa.
Yes. I think so, yes, most definitely. And so we went ahead, and when we got off the ship, Peter contacted the city council, and we started the collective Facebook page group, and raised money, and got permission from the city of Bloomington, and permission from CBS.
And not only that, got this sculpted, but got Kate Mulgrew here recently to see the statue in a ceremony that I watched online. And I admit it made me cry a little bit when the flutist was playing the Voyager theme and she was walking up here for Clem. So, yeah, some cool stuff. Mark, can you show them the shape? It's like the base looks like a comm badge, which is genius. I didn't know that until today when I was standing here. That's genius.
Let's talk about the other side.
Yeah. Oh, and the Federation logo etched in stone.
That was my idea.
That was Mary Beth's idea. Genius. And
yeah, she has been the heart and soul of this project. There's no doubt.
Yeah. And so I'm really excited that I've been communicating with Mary Beth and Peter since like before it got finished. Had them on my podcast. I'm really supportive of the work that they've done, and I'm really glad that they came out here to let me thank them in person. And one last thing. Oh yeah, the Live Long and Prosper print and it's got a little rain debris.
Seems like a good idea.
Yeah, and then of course we have the sign explaining everything for the people who don't know. I love the comm badge on Bloomington, the map of Indiana. I really like the tribute to Jerry Taylor, who was the creator of Captain Janeway, and so this is really cool. And I like the map showing how far Voyager had to travel, because that is Janeway's greatest accomplishment. She got her crew home from the other side of our galaxy, which is really cool. And so this was a lot of hard work, and it's just really cool thing that we have in my hometown. You know, now, like, my stepmom talks about how she goes by the statue all the time. She doesn't know Star Trek at all, but has learned about Kathryn Janeway because of the statue, and it's really neat, and it's a fun thing that everyone in the community can get behind. It's really cool. Mary Beth and Peter, thank you for doing that. Is there anything else you want to tell the folks about the work that you've done to do this? You know, a lot of people come here and they have their coffee with Janeway. It's a really cool thing. You can come and visit. Here in Bloomington, there's lots of nerdy things to do in Indiana, trust me. So you'll want to do that. You guys have anything else you want to say?
I want to add that the whole community really got behind this, and not just because of the Star Trek, but because of what a role model Captain Janeway was. And when the city allowed us to have this location in front of Wonderlab Children's Science Museum, It was the perfect fit, and it's a wonderful tie-in. People come here, the kids learn science, they get to visit Janeway. The whole process was it was a pleasure to do, and there was so much great support in the community, and there still is. And we're just proud that we were able to make it happen.
And it's a great way to get all your Star Trek friends to come visit you.
Yeah, she's not. I can already tell that she's more than a Star Trek fan because look at her earrings.
Well, yes, exactly. A Klingon fan too.
Clearly.
Here's the thing, folks. You should all come to Bloomington and do this. And now back to me at home, and we're gonna break down Picard Season 3. Hello and welcome to Postcards from a Dying World. We are finally here to talk about Picard Season 3 that we, at least my Star Trek regulars in the Roundtable, have been very excited to talk about. It's been 10 weeks of me waiting for Issa to catch up because he refuses to watch it week to week. And I insisted on watching it week to week, and I cannot believe he waited. Did you manage to stay unspoiled, Issa?
I did. I got no spoilers whatsoever the whole time.
Holy
and
shit.
I finished the finale this morning, so perfect.
Okay. But we have a special guest Trekker here today. John Ordover is a professional Trekker, but before we get to him, twice, yeah. Well, we'll get to that in a second, but I do have to shamelessly plug my novel that comes out this summer, The Last Night to Kill Nazis, which you can pre-order now from Clash Books. It's World War II with a Jewish commando.
Nazis.
Well, yes, and a vampire who kills Nazis. So you gotta love that, right? And if you're a regular, this is our 7th Star Trek breakdown, guys. 7th time we've broke down a season of Star Trek together. So my regular bridge crew. Issa Diao, tell the folks who you are and a brief Star Trek history for you because most people will already know it.
Yeah, I don't want to bore people's pants off, but Star Trek, I grew up on the original series, and then I really, the Next Generation was sort of my favorite time of Star Trek. That was I was in high school, and it was all my friends would get together and we'd watch it, and that was I absolutely loved that show. And then I've been on and off with Star Trek ever since. I haven't seen all of Deep Space Nine. I've seen some of Voyager. I watched most of Enterprise, and I've caught back up as the new ones have come out recently. But I was a musician for many years, and so I'd be traveling, and it was hard to keep up with all the TV shows. So I'm like,
though on tour is how you and I met. So
that's true.
That's right. And,
but so by
Deep Space Nine hat, you talked to me about Star Trek.
Yeah.
That's
by the average person standards, I'm a huge Star Trek nerd. In this group, I'm like an occasional watcher, who dabbles. I've read a few books, but I haven't read all of them. That sort of thing. So
right.
That's my.
Sara Lynn Michener is a active and vocal Star Trek fan who you can find lurking on Star Trek shit posting and all over the internet talking about Star Trek, and who I just kept seeing her on different discussion panels, and I heard her on Geek's Guide to the Galaxy, thought she was great, recruited her for my show. Now she's a regular. She'll forever be in my Star Trek circle. Sarah, tell the folks who you are.
I started watching as soon as the TNG pilot came out. I remember being 8 years old and watching it on the floor on a beanbag chair and being like, love at first sight experience. I was just absolutely in heaven, and I've been a big fan ever since. And I had sort of a upbringing similar to Annika Hansen. I was raised by crazy evangelicals. So Star Trek was just my real parent, and I clung to it and I suckled it. I got all of the nutrients I could from it because it was everything that I was being denied. And actually somebody asked recently, they didn't understand why Seven prefers to go by Seven instead of Annika. And I was like, hello, Annika reminds her of being a powerless child and being put in this position and being having horrible things done to her. But Seven is something that she has reclaimed. That is her life and what she remembers. And she has, made the best of the situation and everything. Anyway, so yeah, I have been following pretty much. I've seen almost all of Star Trek. I didn't watch the animated series much because there are very few episodes of that are suitable for adults, very unlike Prodigy. I feel like it's just kind of, I feel like they tried to really make a kids show for the most part. But
Well, the animated series was excellent back in the day when there was literally nothing else on TV for kids. Like Saturday morning had like an
yes,
hour of cartoons, and that was all you got. So that was
yes,
exciting.
yeah, very true.
David's gone. John, why don't you tell us about yourself a little bit and your work with Star Trek?
Well, I found Star Trek at an age when other people find religion. I grew up watching TOS reruns. Then see, you guys really don't know what it was like when that's all we had.
I just turned 51, so I remember life.
I just turned 61.
Okay, you got
By the time
me.
you whippersnapper came along, there was TAS already.
Well,
TAS was a godsend.
Well, and I should introduce the fine-looking man in the robe there. John Ordover is one of my, like, his era of Star Trek that he oversaw is very important to me because I'm a big Star Trek reader. And John's professional history with Star Trek involves being the editor of the Star Trek books during the 90s. And
1992 to 2003.
Yes, and including the Star Trek New Frontier series, which you co-created with Peter David, who wrote the books, and has one Admiral Elizabeth Shelby, who I believe you gave her first name, right?
Yes, we realized when we were going into this, we wanted to use the character, and that she should probably have a first name, despite the long Star Trek tradition of people who only have one name, like, you know, Spock, Data, Cher, like that.
Right.
And we just went with the actress's name.
Right, and you also co-wrote 2 episodes of Deep Space Nine, including Starship Down, which is one of my favorite episodes.
That's interesting. Most people pick It's Only a Paper Moon.
Right. Well, which, you know, is an important episode, but for me, Starship Down has Balance of Terror feel to it, which is my favorite episode.
You think? Yes.
Yeah, a little bit. But John, tell the folks a little bit about your history with Star Trek.
Well, I grew up watching and loving it. At some point in my life, after college type stuff, I'm talking to your empty room.
It's for the people at home. They're the masses of people
yes.
at home watching.
And I moved back to New York to
dog management.
To get into publishing, and I worked at Tor Books for a while. And while I was doing that, earlier before I got into that, I had been reading this incoming slush manuscripts for the Star Trek novel series, because once you start freelancing, you start networking. And I called Kevin Ryan, who was the editor at the time, and he said, "I don't have a budget for a freelance reader right now. Call me every 3 months." So I called every 3 months, and he eventually said, "I do have a budget now. Let's talk a little bit. Why do you want to read slush for Star Trek novels?" And I said, "Because I want to turn the fact that I know Spock's blood type into cold hard cash." And that apparently was the right reason. So I read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of submissions.
Right, and you had a really unique position because as editor of that line during the Berman Golden Age, right, you had to interface with the studio and with product management, and you were overseeing things like, Captain Janeway's backstory.
And by the way, this episode is going to start with a video introduction of me visiting the Janeway statue in my hometown that we share.
Okay.
Before our stuff starts. And but so you had to work with Jerry Taylor, for example, on Mosaic, the novel.
Well, it's you make it sound like some kind of burden.
Well, I don't mean that, but it was amazing, I'm sure.
She and I had been chatting, mostly overseeing Star Trek stuff was handled by licensing, and my major interface there was Paula Block, who was a joy to work with. I mean, we had our differences of opinion at times, but we worked them out. She never killed anything without coming up with a way for us to do it or having us talk it out.
Mm-hmm.
And was very, very helpful in a lot of things, like getting New Frontier started. Would not have happened if she hadn't been able to convince the powers that be that it was an acceptable thing to do.
Right. To start your own Star Trek series. Yeah.
But in any case, as part of interfacing with Jerry Taylor, I said, "Hey, Jerry, you want to write a novel for us?"
Right.
And she said, "Well, I don't know what I'd want to write about." And I said, "How about Janeway's backstory? You're the only one who can do it."
Exactly. Yeah.
You're the only one who can write the backstory of the character, because everyone else, we'd be stopped left and right, but nobody can tell you it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Or you, and she said, "Okay." I mean, I didn't have an abrasive interaction with the staff. I had a very pleasant reaction. Every once in a while, I'd come up with an idea, like when we did the Eugenics Wars novels.
With Greg Cox.
Sorry, by Greg Cox.
With Greg Cox, friend of the podcast, been on before.
Yes, friend of mine. But enough sucking up to Greg Cox. And considering your opening discussion, yeah, enough sucking cocks. In any case,
okay.
John, I don't know what kind of podcast you think this is, but it's a family podcast.
That's worse. In any case, I knew I wanted to do the Eugenics Wars because we'd already passed when it was supposed to be set. And it was one of those things where if we don't do it now, we never will.
Right.
And the big question was, do we have an actual all-out war?
Or a
in which
Cold
would
War.
Set up Star Trek as a completely different timeline? Or do we stick with the general sense that Star Trek is our possible future? And we knew no matter what we picked, some fans would hate it. So I dropped a line to Ron Moore, and said, "Hey, Ron, I'm having trouble making this decision. I don't want to firmly say that Star Trek is not the future, but otherwise we'd have to do it as, sort of behind the scenes." And he said, and we had a nice discussion about whether Star Trek should be maintained as a possible future. And we decided to go with that. So the Eugenics Wars happened, and you didn't see it.
It was Cold War and very X-Filesy and very good. I love those novels. So John, you're going to be here specifically as part of this panel to comment on Star Trek Picard episode or season 3, but we will get a little bit of your opinions of the first 2 seasons. Listeners of the show can find our opinions. I'm generally a defender of season 1. Sarah is as well. I'm not as big of a fan of season 2. And Sarah tried very hard to convince Issa and I that it was better than we thought.
Let me jump in with a limitation that I guess we should have discussed before I came on the show.
Right. So
I used to be the guy from my upbringing, from my schooling from 1st grade to 12th grade, with the most Star Trek cred.
Right.
Unfortunately, Akiva Goldsman was 2 years ahead of me.
Oh, at the same school?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
And Michelle Hurd
yeah, exactly.
was 4 years behind me with her sister in my class.
That's
Incredible.
interesting. So you have a lot of Star Trek Picard connections here.
Well, yes. So, it's sort of like, I will comment to the extent that I can, but not perhaps with any level of viciousness.
Okay.
I can't imagine this crowd being vicious about anything.
Okay, good, because I was going to say, basically, Star Trek Picard was done, this would be a way to look at it, was done by the guys from my old garage band.
Right.
That's so cool.
No, that is awesome. And look, here's the thing. The way I feel about, and I think this is important to this discussion because we are talking about Picard Season 3, is that my personal feeling on, like, I know a lot of people have recently bashed the idea that Patrick Stewart said, no uniforms, no starships. I actually love that there was finally a Star Trek show that wasn't so Starfleet centric. Like, I loved having something in that universe, something you guys kind of played with the engineering novels, like that had, and you guys did that. You had a couple novels that were outside of the Starfleet, like directly the Starfleet purview and stuff. So I've always wanted to see that Star Trek universe expand. And I personally like Star Trek, or I like Picard Season 1 for what it is. My problem with the Season 2 is that it got too far away from it and spent too much time in our modern world. And I just don't like Season 2. And also, Q's never been one of my favorite adversaries. So,
what?
Yes, it's just I'm not anti-Q. I like some Q stories. I'm just saying he's not my favorite. So I got that going on. But
he just appeared right behind you. No, sorry.
Yeah. But the whole thing about Patrick Stewart's guidelines that he didn't want it to be like just another Star Trek show, I actually thought was a positive. And it's clear that when Terry Matalas went to him and said, yeah, that's great, but this is going to be a TNG season 8, basically. I think
season 3.
Yeah, season 3.
Right.
And I think, at that point, like, I think it was hard for Patrick Stewart to say, he'd done 2 seasons the other way. So it was a little bit easier to say, like, okay, now we're going to put on uniforms and we're going to be on a starship. And I think that one of the reasons why the fans are so high on this season is because of, it's, Ira Stephen Bear had the attitude that I don't care what the fans want. I'm going to give them what they need. Right. And whereas it seems like Terry Matalas was definitely saying, I'm going to give the fans what they want. I'm going to give them a lot of what they want. And for that reason, I think season 1 is like a healthy smoothie and season 3 is like a cake. And it's delicious, but it's very sweet, right? That's my analogy. But anyways, so let's now get into if you don't want to go deep on seasons 1 and 2, I get that, John. But season 3 we're here to talk about, so we're gonna have to get into it. And one thing that I definitely want to say also is there's some mirroring going on with Terry Matalas and Dave Filoni from the Star Wars world, because once the Star Wars prequels became a disaster and Dave Filoni became this like savior to the fans, there's a degree that they're trying to set this up for a lot of fans are doing this with Terry Matalas, that give Terry Matalas the keys to Star Trek and that he's the savior of Star Trek, as if Alex Kurtzman had nothing to do with producing this season of Star Trek. And I just want to say, if you think that, you're nuts. Alex Kurtzman is the executive producer of all things Star Trek. He oversaw this entire season, and that talk's got to stop. Because, in my opinion, like, Alex Kurtzman's involved with all of it, and that's just the way it is. So, does anyone else want to talk
let me give a quick opening speech for this.
Sure.
It'll only be a couple hours, don't worry.
I'm listening, but I'm going to go do dog stuff while you're talking.
Okay.
David,
stay in your chair. I know it's Star Trek, but
old...
don't keep falling out of your chair. In any case, when it comes to this sort of creative collaboration, and every episode of television you've ever seen is a creative collaboration, it is very, very difficult to pick apart who came up with what, who's responsible for what direction someone suggested that they decide to go with. It's almost impossible. It's sort of like saying, well, which guy on the football team won the game? Well, if you actually look at it very closely, it could be one unnamed defensive back who tackled the other quarterback at exactly the right moment. I mean, it doesn't possible. And like Peter, David, and I came up with New Frontier together, but neither of us really remembers 100% who came up with what.
Right.
And if we don't, I mean, I like to say, I just came up with the general concept, and after that, it's a blur.
Right.
And so picking out any one person and blaming them for it, or applauding them for it. I mean, even original Star Trek, a lot of the credit given to Roddenberry really belongs to Gene L. Kuhn
and Dorothy Fontana.
Dorothy Fontana. I mean, you have to mix it all. It's been put through a blender. You can't sort it out. Right. Also, frankly, the last good, from my point of view, as an old crank, the last good Star Wars movie was released in 1977. There has not been a good Star Wars
now it's a whole different podcast now.
Well,
yeah, okay, go on.
To confirm what you're saying, like one of the things that I learned when I did that Dorothy Fontana article and I started reading all like the memos and behind the scene things, for example, like the Federation was completely a creation of Dorothy Fontana for Journey to Babel, right? For that episode. Like there was no Federation before that. And in the notes for the treatment, she's basically creating the Federation, and everything that like we still think of now as the Federation was just in this random episode where all she really wanted to do was have Spock interact with his parents, right? In the beginning.
Right.
And came up with this whole framework. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I just, on the idea that Terry Matalas, and I have a lot of respect for Terry Matalas, the showrunner of this season. We have mutual friends who spoke very highly of him right when he got the job, like long before. And I don't know how he stays on Twitter and interacts with every nitpick that people make of this series, and he responds to them. And for the most part, I really enjoy his commentary, except for when he said that number one, John Luke's dog was a changeling. That's not funny. I don't like that. But besides that,
that's fucked up. I didn't know that.
Yeah, every time people ask him what happened to number one, he says he was a changeling. That's his response, and I'm like, that's not funny. I don't find that
funny at all.
No.
Especially since it's a pity. That's fucked up.
Hey, look, yeah. I'm still stuck that I'm now talking to someone who thinks A New Hope is better than Empire Strikes Back.
You are. I'll go on a different show. I'll go into details why.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that before. That's fantastic. So we'll some other time, another place.
I know one other person that feels that way, but Well, and I do think that there's something to being in the theater the first time.
And let me yes, in the theater the first time, in 1979, watching Empire Strikes Back. You have to remember, guys, someone my age, it didn't end.
Right.
And we didn't know how many years it would be until there was another one.
Fair enough. It isn't a complete movie. I will give you that. It's a middle movie for sure.
Okay.
So back to the other franchise.
So Issa, well, let's go. Sarah, I'm sure you have an opinion on the Terry Matalas being anointed savior. I think he would find that annoying, but what do you feel about that?
I've been so annoyed because the last 3 days, I basically just decided I need to stay off the groups for the next 2 weeks until the white men get it out of their systems, because they are just fanboying over him so hard, and it's like, and it's so irritating because not only are multiple people, responsible for all of these things, but they are saying things like, well, they have a petition to bring Shaw back from the dead, which is fine. They did the same fucking thing with Pike. When Discovery Season 2 came out, they fell in love with Pike, even though Burnham was an incredible character. They needed that white male charismatic captain, no matter what. They desperately needed that, and they did not know how to function and did not know how to empathize with other characters without that. So they lose their fucking minds every time that happens. They
started Burnham by having her mutiny and pull a phaser on her own captain.
Which was great.
Exactly the most.
Which was great because it usurped the expectations of what you would want from Star Trek.
The captain would not be a mutineer.
I think she would. That's a discussion for another day. But so these guys are saying things like, kick Seven out of the captain's chair so that Shaw can take it back. I won't watch Star Trek Legacy unless, that happens. I didn't
even know people are saying that. That's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, it's fucked up. People are saying that they won't watch the Section 31 movie unless Terry Matalas is involved, and it's like, come on, guys. All he had the easiest job of any of the showrunners that we've had for Star Trek Picard. He didn't have to deal with the pandemic.
Any of the modern Star Trek, he had the easiest.
Yeah, like he pretty much just had to let the nostalgia do its thing. And there are just as many plot holes and things in Season 3 as there were in Season 1 and 2. And so every criticism that they took so seriously, like the idea that, for instance, we're just going to plug this iPod into a toaster and make a phaser. They do that all the time in Star Trek. They did it in Season 1 and Season 2 of Picard, and these guys were absolutely up in arms about it. They did it in Season 3 like 3 or 4 times, and they were like, yes, this is good writing. So the double standards drive me up the wall.
Well, and I don't think Terry Matalas would actually have that. I think he'd probably think a lot of this is ridiculous and silly too. And the thing, it should be reminded that Terry Matalas started as a production assistant on Voyager, and Jerry Ryan has even said that her earliest memories of Terry Matalas was him knocking on her trailer door and delivering a script, right? And he came up from nothing in Star Trek, and we should appreciate the fact that they took the piss out of him to name the most awful planet on Enterprise, Matalas Prime. Everyone thinks he did this as himself on the show, but it was actually done on Enterprise as a joke to make fun of him. And so I have a certain amount of sympathy for Terry, that he did not mean to get turned into the patron saint of white boy Star Trek fans.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, and I give him credit for like being on Twitter and fighting, arguing with everybody. But at the same time, like, I do wish that the one thing I wish he would do would be to give the rest of the creatives, Kurtzman and all that, to a little bit more shout out, saying like, hey, he does it with his team that he worked on the season with, but he hasn't done it with the upper management quite as much, in my opinion. But at the same time, I have great respect for, also his 12 Monkeys show is greatly underrated. It was way better than I ever expected. And so I respect him as a creator. And I didn't know until last night when I was watching an interview with him that he oversaw a season of MacGyver. And now I want to watch the season of MacGyver just because that's weird and funny. But that being said, Issa, do you have any comments? You don't follow any?
Oh no, I don't follow any of this. I don't know who these people are. I hear names. I'm like, was this a character? No, then I don't know. I don't follow the behind the scenes, but it's always interesting to hear about it from you guys.
The bottom line is you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You don't know who does what. You don't know what pressure things we're under. You don't know what screwed up at the last minute, and the janitor tossed out the idea that saved the episode. You just don't know. And it's never only one person.
Right.
Never.
Right.
Except if it's me, then it's one no.
If it's you and it's good. If you liked it and I did it, then that was me. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I don't want to go too far on that, but I do the same thing happened in Star Wars with Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. As soon as The Mandalorian came out, they were going to save Star Wars, and everybody wanted them to do everything Star Wars. And then they put Lizzo and Jack Black in an episode of The Mandalorian, and all of a sudden people were like, maybe they're not perfect, but
so gross.
Yeah.
Always the usual suspects too. It's always the same guys.
Yeah. Well,
ruining every fandom.
Right, exactly. And so Star Trek has their own, and Star Wars has their own. And so the funny thing is that like I said, I have I have one friend who used to work in the office right next to the Paramount lot, and he used to accidentally run into Terry Metalis during like his lunch break, and they became friends because they were talking about each other's t-shirts. Like, that's how the level of like one of these friends. Another one's a professional who worked with him, but this guy used to, like, he said Terry would sit down and have lunch with them, and then they would start talking about anime for like hours. And so, like, I get it, he's a genuine guy, and you can tell that the cast and crew all love working for him. That being said, the fan anointment is a little bit annoying now, but I want to be as done with that as I can be and just talk about the merits of the show at this point. So starting with Issa, your overall thoughts, knowing that we're going to break it down more later.
My overall thoughts. I have to explain how I am
your opening salvo.
Yeah. So I'm of two minds, right? I watched the whole thing, almost the whole thing, with a giant stupid smile on my face, having a great time, enjoying the hell out of watching it, right? Because that was like, it was my childhood. It was like, I love these characters. But if I'm at all objective about it, most of it I thought was pretty terrible. And so you have to hold those two things together, because obviously I don't think it was terrible. But if it had been like some new thing that wasn't Star Trek, and they had done the things that they did, which we'll get into, I would have been like, you've got to be kidding me, right? But since it was like, I love these characters, I know these characters, I just want to see them do their thing, and I don't care what they do, I loved it. And I sort of said that about the first two seasons, but this one was a little more. This one was more. It was like I'm just going to give a really quick example. And again, I loved the show. It was a fantastic season, right? But so we have Rafi, and we find out her handler is Worf, and then we find out that Worf's handler is Ro, and it was just like an extra layer of, they just vamped Rafi and Worf.
Oh, come on, there's only like 8 people in Starfleet, you know that.
Totally. But it was like that whole part was just so extra useless and painful that I love Worf. Worf was so good in this, but it was like the whole Rafi's whole but her story for the first half of the season just added nothing. It was just like, why is this happening? Like, they could have.
I disagree, but
they could have just had Worf doing it, and then Worf could have been reporting to Ro, and you'd have the exact same thing. That one example, right? I mean, there's there's more, but just like but I still loved it. I had a great time. I really I also noticed that I felt very different about the characters that I know less. Like, so the Next Generation characters, every second on the screen, I had that smile on my face. I was loving it. I feel good about 7 or 9. Rafi, I feel I didn't really love her stuff. Like, I felt like she could have easily not been in this and it would have been fine. I mean, her acting's great. There's nothing against the character. She was good in the other seasons. I just didn't think there was one part where they were clearly, obviously they're getting the old crew together, and that's the whole point. But it was like Rafi and Seven stayed behind so that the old crew could be together, and it was just so forced. It was kind of hilarious. But
that wasn't her fault.
No, of course. But I'm just saying, like, just some part of my mind while I'm watching this is like, this is very contrived. But at the same time, I loved it, right? I was like,
I was sure that when they said we're sitting around the table again, I really thought, oh, I wonder. And Picard, of course, will get to carve the turkey. I mean, it felt like Thanksgiving.
Right.
Totally.
Well, and I will say the thing with Raffi, the only thing that annoyed, I like Raffi as a character, but it was weird to me that Picard didn't like, that he was like, oh, I'm with my old buddies, so I don't care about you anymore. They developed their friendship so well in the first 2 seasons. The fact that he barely acknowledged her seemed weird to me.
But if you say the plot out loud, like quickly describe what happened on the show. You're like, well, this happened and this happened and this happened. There is so much stuff that happened. They should have cut out about half of it and it would have been a million times better. But, again, I smile on my face. So,
right. Well, see, I have a very nostalgic reaction to Picard 3 as well.
Yeah.
But it's more like, wow. For the first half of it, at least, what part of Wrath of Khan are they going to put in this time?
Now,
Picard already has a long lost son. Then they get stuck in then they hide in a nebula. I mean, that's just the top of it. I mean, they just.
And so, John, you might not have made it all the way to the third movie here, so you might not know what I'm talking about. But the end of the season was pretty much a remake of Return of the
Jedi. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yes. Anything in which the finale is to blow up the thing we already blowed up a couple of times before.
Right. And fly out of the explosion.
It's going to be Return of the Jedi.
Fly out of the explosion, the father-son thing in the middle of it, the 3 different battles. It was Return of the Jedi.
It was Return of the Jedi. Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah, what were your overall opening salvo thoughts on the season?
I mean, I loved it. I loved the nostalgia, but I definitely saw a ton of flaws, and a lot of them having to do with plot contrivances and things like that I can get into later. But like overall, I think that I don't think people will really appreciate seasons 1 and 2 of Picard until Patrick Stewart has died. Hopefully he will die when he's 137 years old. He's, in great shape. So that's going to happen. I'm hoping.
Well, he's in an android body now.
Right.
That should help.
I mean, Patrick Stewart himself. That's what I think, that as soon as, because I think that, and it's sad to me because I feel like there's the same homogenization that's happening at Netflix, where something has to do so well in order to get remade, in order to get a second season, means that these very thoughtful series are not being given second or third seasons, right? We saw that happen with the OA. And because of the structure of the way that Netflix works, and what happens is this homogenization is happening where everything feels a little bit the same because it has to be broad reaching enough that it creates a huge audience. It has to have a huge audience or else. And that I feel, I'm a little worried that is kind of happening with Star Trek.
That's called television.
Yeah.
Well, I know, but the beauty of the streaming era is that for a brief moment in time, we had the space for some very unique programs that didn't have to have a huge following. But I think because the economics have grown with it and because of the way that capitalism comes in and ruins everything, here we are. So the thing is, when Patrick Stewart announced that he was doing this show, and he said that he was only interested in doing it if it wasn't TNG, and he said that he wanted it to be this this much more intimate thing that took advantage of, you know, the format, I think, of the new golden age of television and all that stuff. I expected a couple of thoughtful seasons of character study. And for the first 2 seasons, I got what I wanted. I wanted this deep dive into why Picard is the way that he is, you know, that fills out the character so that when
Why
you do
Guinan is so much younger than she was in the episode set in the Gold Rush.
Visual stuff doesn't matter. Like, visual stuff really doesn't matter. You have to just accept the fact that, you know, in that case, for instance, it's more important to get a really good actress. So, you know, I expected that
a really good actress of the appropriate age.
I wanted a show that didn't treat Starfleet like Hogwarts, you know, that it didn't treat it like wish fulfillment, but dealt with how Starfleet would actually function as a bureaucracy that has to confront its tendency toward colonialist thinking that it did throughout TNG over and over and over again. It always worked out well for them because they were the heroes. And I think that Picard, you know, or Patrick Stewart was sort of very much wanting to push back against some of those narratives. And I got what I wanted. I wanted a show that fixed problems created by the Berman era that were most keenly felt by the minorities it excluded or abused, despite Trek's long history of doing better in that department than so many other franchises. You know, 7 of 9 didn't have to wear an oxygen tank in order to deal with her costume. That's great. That's such progress, you know? And I got what I wanted. I wanted an intimate character study of who this character was. And that is what I got in seasons 1 and 2. Season 3 was a nice wrap up to all of TNG, and I loved it. It was great. But I do have some criticisms of it, and I do have some things that, you know, and it's so funny because so many of the things that people complained about with seasons 1 and 2 were also true about season 3. Plot holes, like convoluted stories, bringing up too many things, not resolving threads that they started, you know. And so it's just hilarious to me that if you give Trekkies some nostalgia, anything is forgivable, anything is permissible.
Well, there's an inherent nostalgia to just doing more TNG instead of more, even with just Star Trek Picard, to doing more TNG related material rather than something completely new.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. One of the things I loved about season 1 is that they allowed Jean-Luc to be old and to be flawed and to be an old man. And I loved that. And I think in the way, and I said this at the time, that I thought that season 1 of Picard was learning all the right lessons from The Last Jedi, from Star Wars, like the breaking the mold of the franchise, like letting their characters be old and flawed. And so what, I don't think season 3 of Picard is as bad as Rise of Skywalker was.
Oh, come on. How can you even say those in the same sentence?
They're not because Picard season 3 was fun and it had really good moments. And Rise of Skywalker was just a train wreck. But
here's where I think you're completely wrong, which, you know, means you are wrong because yes. I said it.
Well, I kind of went too far there.
The problem
I admit that.
with the next Star Wars trilogy was you had under contract Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, and you told the story about other people.
Right.
I mean, it's sort of like what we had wanted, what the Star Wars fans had wanted all these years was to get the gang back together.
Right.
And they sort of like Wrath of Khan. You got the gang back together and you started sliding in supporting characters.
Right.
In Star Wars, they flipped it for reasons that are inescapable to me. I mean, if you just made a movie with Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie, R2, C-3PO wasn't really in the first movie.
No, I have to disagree because the Force Awakens actually set everything up really well. It introduced some new characters. It had the mystery of Luke and we had Han show up, and we had Leia. And if Carrie Fisher hadn't passed away, unfortunately, then we probably
the third movie was supposed to be her movie.
So
I'm still mad about that.
They did set up the old and the new very well. If you're a kid, my kids were just old enough to see Force Awakens in the theater, or my older kid was. She loved it, like it worked. And so I give them a pass for not just doing a older Star Wars characters, reunion show or whatever. I think
it doesn't have to just be that, but it has to be primarily that. Again, Wrath of Khan. What happens there? Well, it didn't wind up going that way into the future, but the idea was we lose Spock and gain Savik.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, well, in the next movie, we lose McCoy and gain Joanna. In the next movie, we lose Kirk and we get in other words,
but they didn't go that way.
Sort of.
We lost the Enterprise in Search for Spock. So
in 3, yes.
Yeah, that's what we lost. But
yes, but we lost a character you could build another one of.
Yeah.
But never mind. Back to
but so okay, I think I've got where we're all generally feeling. We all think it's no, John, I didn't get your overall thoughts. What are your
overall thought about Picard? Was that there were occasionally some things. It was wonderful, and I'll tell you why. TNG, and you whippersnappers may feel differently about this. The problem with TNG is they had this bar on emotions. Emotions couldn't go up higher than this, and they couldn't go down lower than this. I mean, they had a whole episode in which Beverly was saved from a life of orgasms because you just couldn't take the emotions up past a certain point. And the result was these excellent actors were to some extent hobbled. Then you come along and there's Star Trek Picard, and suddenly all the restraints are off. The writing is really good. The actors are allowed to act to the maximum of their ability. And that, to me, that's what drove Star Trek Picard. Oh my gosh, they're doing TNG, but with the blinders off.
HR department in space. I always thought that TNG was HR department in space. As much as I loved it, and I feel like that's Roddenberry's influence because he wanted this utopia. And so nobody got to have feelings because we've solved feelings by the 24th century. And it's like, come on.
It just I felt, and so that was my huge positive for Picard. I think there were some budget restrictions that you can see. I think sometimes they did 2 episodes that should have been 1 episode.
Definitely.
I mean, you can
pick the same cliffhanger twice.
They fought the strike far too long. I'm sitting here thinking, wait a minute, you're doing Wrath of Khan. So what you do, and the Shrike is loaded with weapons. Well, you use your computers to override their weapons and blow them up on their own ship. I mean, Kirk would have had this down in 5 minutes.
Well, and the whole, I think the main concern, and this is my nitpick hat, but it was really the main problem with it, I thought, watching it all at once, binging it, was that the first half, the only thing that mattered in the entire first half was the relationship between Picard and Beverly and Jack, or Picard and Jack specifically. And everything else that happened sort of didn't matter. And it was just like you could
I think if they'd blown up the ship with all the characters on it, you might have felt differently.
No.
But okay.
What I mean is, I apologize for not knowing the episode number, but I'm pretty sure you could tell someone, hey, Picard has the son with Dr. Crusher, and here's a quick 30-second explanation. Start the season on episode 5 and end up just as happy with that.
Don't they have birth control in their era?
Well, I thought it was implied that she got pregnant on purpose, but I didn't know if they didn't really dive into that. You know,
I don't think so.
And a lot of the explanations did not land. It's not believable that Beverly wouldn't have told Picard.
Right. Well,
I thought they handled that pretty well. Like at no point was I like, this is ridiculous.
The idea is that she didn't want his life to be in danger because he would be known as Picard's son. And what did we find them doing? Popping around the galaxy, getting shot at. I mean, it's like, no, I didn't want to.
That sort of proves her point, though, right? I mean, like as she kept him away from Picard, he wasn't in danger, right? Or at least she didn't know.
Like,
well, they got into their own form of danger, but yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that was, obviously they were repeating the Wrath of Khan thing. I did see an interview with Terry Matalas where he was saying that he was afraid to suggest the idea that the son be Beverly's in the and that he suggested the son storyline, and he said Patrick Stewart was like, it should be Beverly's, and then he was like, yes, great idea, because he was afraid to suggest it.
That's awesome.
To Patrick Stewart. And so it's funny because how that kind of came about, but I don't know. I didn't mind that. What I found unbelievable is that, and look, we'll get into the Justice for Laris thing eventually, but the lady who hid your child from you for 20 years, or the one who's running your chateau, first of all, I did not understand season 1 why you don't take the ex-Tal Shiar agent with you on your mission in that one. And I certainly don't see why you don't say, hey, sweetie, I got this issue. You are a master spy. Come help us. And I know some people were like, well, that wouldn't have worked with Beverly. Come on, that's good tension. That's good drama. So Laris should have been there, and you will never find, first of all.
Well, at the very least, Laris was a trustworthy person back on Earth who could have worked from the other end.
At the very least. I agree. Yeah. And number 1's not a changeling. No.
She even said no Starfleet, and Laris is not Starfleet. So Bingo. It was perfect. And I saw one of the fandom magazines call her his housekeeper. And this was maybe 2-3 months ago. And I was like, what? His housekeeper? What?
No.
She's a badass.
She showed how capable she was in season 1, in the very at the beginning. And so as a character, she should have been there. And that was a major thing for me on that. But I'll live with that. The one thing that I thought was the worst writing is that the 2 episodes in a row that had the same cliffhanger. If I think one thing that would have fixed this whole season is if you take out the second episode in a row where a cliffhanger is what is Jack, right?
Yes.
And then you get rid of that and you introduce the whole Borg storyline 1 episode earlier and take your time solving the Borg thing, it would have been more interesting. I groaned a lot at the beginning of when they revealed that it was the Borg, but I understand that it makes sense that the worst thing that ever happened to John Luke was best of both worlds.
The problem is when you think about it, the plot is too convoluted. The Borg, who are starving themselves and about to die, and I don't know why. I don't know.
Janeway poisoned them all at the end of Voyager.
Okay. So the
Janeway
Borg
being a boss.
Okay. So the Borg are not doing well. So they come up with a plan to work with the changelings, who they have a common enemy with, to infiltrate all of Starfleet, to do this transporter thing, to then be able to have their, Jack, who's now become this transmitter. And it was just like, are you kidding?
Two things to that. One, I loved that McCoy was right
about the transporters.
After all these years. It's a damn stupid way to travel. Scattering a man's molecules all over the universe. It is okay. That's one. That's why I loved I love that. Two, with Jack, if you're going to do something where someone's eyes change, you're calling back to where no man has, and give them superpowers.
Yep.
You're calling back to where no man has gone before. You're calling strongly back to Gary Mitchell. And you at least have to recognize that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
and
my
then
first
having
thought.
it turn out to only be the Borg,
Yeah.
what I found was a little less than it could have been.
Yeah. Well, I just think the changeling served almost no purpose in the show, and the villain Vatic, the Shrike, that was completely useless. If that was edited completely out of the show, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. Like, she was so over the top, like Shakespearean and crazy, and just that did not work for me at all.
I mean, okay, here's the thing.
You throw in something that hasn't worked for me in any of the newer shows.
Okay.
And this one too, for the most part, until toward the end of this one.
So
it seems they've forgotten phasers have stun settings.
Right. Well, that too, sure.
They really have. I mean, it's like there was this whole thing of
now they have transporters
where, oh, you have no choice but to kill me before I'm taken over. By, like, what do you mean? She just set your phaser on stun.
Right.
And there seemed to be like so many options where that was the solution, and they just had to disintegrate someone instead.
Yeah. Oh. Also, no, you liked the Shakespearean crazy villain?
Oh, you're talking about me?
I think it went on a bit too long.
Oh yeah, Sarah, you had something you looked like you were about to say about that, though.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
so
but we're old white men. We get to talk.
Go, Sarah.
Here's the thing. The biggest problem that I had with Picard Season 3 was that, there were 3 interconnected things that they got wrong that they could have fixed by putting them all together. Okay. 1, I hate the way that they just sort of told us through exposition that Borg and changelings were working together. They didn't show it at all. They didn't connect those dots at all. They just told us, and we were supposed to buy it. Okay, fine. I hated the way that Jack found out he had Borg bits. Okay. I hated the way that Vatic went out. And here's the thing. There was absolutely no reason for Deanna and Picard to be the ones who were like, sorry, Jack, we don't trust you now. All of a sudden, they would have known how he would react. They made that happen. They made him go off and basically commit mass murder because he goes off to the Borg cube, which is obviously what he would have done. Deanna is a fucking empath. She knows better. She knows. She just sat there
and
telling
if she had
him,
a
"You can trust us.
Stun.
You can trust us. We won't hurt you. You can." And then she immediately is like, "Oh, there's protocol." They don't give a fuck about protocol. That was so stupid. And he didn't. The only way that would have worked is if he had shown any aggression at all toward the good people. Like, he only used his Borg parts for the changelings. He never showed any kind of aggression towards the good people. And so that whole thing didn't work. And so all they had to do was have Vatic be the one to tell him that he was Borg. And then she could have delivered him to the Borg.
Absolutely.
She serves her purpose, and the thing is, she had a point. Like, I loved her speech. I loved the performance. And I think the reason that they gave her that many episodes is because they recognized that she was Christopher Plumbering the shit out of that shit. Okay. She did such a good job. They were like, let's give her more airtime. And I understand that. I respect that.
That didn't land for me at all. Like, I was just like, what is going on? This is terrible. Who is this woman and why is she talking? Why is she crazy?
Like, if she had been the one to deliver him, and like,
I agree with you on
that.
Sarah,
you're totally right. Your version is a million times better.
About Picard, and not knowing that Section 31 was doing these terrible things, I hate the fact that they never went back and addressed that. All I asked for was, if you're going to put that in there and you're going to make us root for her in this tiny way and be like, she's got a point, is at the end have a conversation where Patrick Stewart is sitting down with an admiral, Jean-Luc Picard is sitting down with an admiral and saying, hey, if we're going to have a Section 31, they can't do war crimes. They can't, or else I'm out. I'm not going to save the galaxy anymore because y'all are creating these problems. And that never got addressed. and it's like they made us sympathize with her for no reason, and then they gave her a shitty death.
Well,
But
they could do that in Star Trek Legacy if, hopefully. But
Speaking of Star Trek Legacy.
Yeah, no, we'll get to Star Trek Legacy a little bit more later.
Okay.
But to follow, I agree with you, Sarah, that having Vadic deliver Jack would have solved a lot of problems. It would have solved a lot. And also, but I did like Amanda Plummer in this role. I did like her as a weirder villain and kind of having the con role. I will say one of the things I do want to say before we go too much further is that I think the best episode, much like Strange New Worlds, episode 4 was the banger. I think the best episode of this entire
Which
season.
one was episode 4? Refresh my memory there.
That's the one where they no-win scenario where they escape the nebula with the space babies and Crusher solving the issue with sciencing the shit out of it. And because that's the one that I felt the most like Star Trek. That, when people say, one of the things that's annoyed me about Picard is I keep hearing over and over again from people, this is the best Star Trek's been in 30 years. Well, first of all, I disagree. And second of all, have these people not watched Strange New Worlds? That's my first thing. Because I think Strange New Worlds is better, in my opinion, than this season. The first season of Strange New Worlds.
For that one fairy tale episode, I completely.
Besides the one fairy tale episode, even though it had a Deep Space Nine Easter egg, and I appreciate that.
Throw back to the previous podcast discussion we had about that. So
yes. So the thing about Strange New Worlds and this season of Picard is the 4th episode is where, for me, it all came together. And this no-win scenario with the space babies and them solving it, and that was when it felt like Star Trek to me, more so than any other point in the season. And so at the end, you got all the nostalgia feelings. We got the Enterprise D. We got all that stuff, but it felt like a Star Trek movie to me, whereas the 4th episode felt like an episode of TNG.
But why did they have the portal weapon? Like, that was another thing that just completely was not necessary to the story.
Well, look, they're doing the changelings and all that, and Vadic. It's all red herrings, and I get that. And has anybody here seen the movie A Perfect Getaway? Okay, Perfect Getaway has a running joke in the movie where
we only watch Star Trek. How do we make that clear?
Wait,
so there's a running joke.
Is just such a generic name. I feel like I've seen it, but I don't know.
Perfect Getaway is a genius crime thriller movie, but there's a character who's supposed to be a screenwriter in it, and and Timothy Oliphant's character keeps saying, "Oh, I could be a writer," and he keeps referring to the red snapper, and he's meaning to say the red herring. But the problem is now I constantly say red snapper when I'm meaning to say red herring, and very few people have seen that movie. So it just gets lost. And I just want to put that out there.
I have seen
if I ever on this podcast ever say red snapper, that is why.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the Hawaii movie, right?
Yes.
Okay, I have seen that.
I think that's a great movie.
Let me jump in about the changelings.
Yes.
How is it that they no longer have the capacity to change into things that aren't human, that aren't humanoid?
They do.
I mean, like a desk.
Well, they do.
They go around scanning all these people. But in Deep Space Nine, when they had to scan for changelings, they had to scan the wall.
Scan the whole room. Yeah. Well, that's a good nitpick. I appreciate it.
I think it was from their genetic engineering in section.
Yeah, it must have been.
Yeah.
Well, and we do know that these are rogue changelings and that they're not everybody. So who knows? I mean, I think that they can expand on that later. I think the thing that I did like about that, even though it was a red herring and it was like a misdirect, that the changelings, and I think it's good because to have an effect of the Dominion War is a good thing. It expands the universe and makes it feel more whole. In in the discussion in season 1 when they were talking about the aftermath of the Romulan explosion, and that they were, I always wanted them to say, and refugees from the Dominion War. I just wanted them to say it once or twice just to make it feel whole to me as a Deep Space Nine fan. That being said, I don't know. Anyways, did you guys have any moments, starting with Issa, I'm going to go around. For me, it was episode 4 where I felt like this is a high point for the season. Before we get to the finale and the 1701D of it all, did you have any moments in the season that stood out for you as like a high point? Because for me, it was episode 4. Issa?
I don't know if I could point to a specific spot. There were definitely a few moments that I found very entertaining and literally like was laughing out loud while I watched it. One that stands out is when Beverly's at tactical at the end and she fires the phasers in front of torpedoes and it hits everything and everyone just
turn around,
slowly turns and looks at her. That was great. Worf had so many good parts that I've lost count.
I almost sent you the severed heads of my enemies, but I was told that would be passive aggressive.
Totally, that was great.
The headings are on Wednesdays. Yes, he had all the lines. Yeah.
Totally.
I don't remember that Riker Worf banter from the show.
No, that was. Like
I'm right here.
Yeah, exactly. That was good, right? Like, I will make it a threesome. That was cute. But I felt like they didn't quite get Geordi right. I was a little weirded out by the plot around like Geordi not being like, I'm gonna help right away. They were trying to give some tension or whatever, but it was like you would have thought Geordi would have been more on board to help right away. Because he was.
They just wanted to say that he, he had different priorities because of his daughters. Having children makes people incredibly selfish. That's why I do not plan on having children.
Good move. But
you're evenly split parents to non-parent here.
And I think they set it up, but it was a budget issue more than anything else.
With the what?
I would have loved to, in the finale, to see all the ships cleared out of the museum.
Oh yeah.
No,
Worf on the Defiant,
right?
7 on the Voyager.
To have them all come to that they were all
have them all riding. Especially once Data said, apparently we are the cavalry. Well, once you say that, it would have been great if a cavalry had shown up.
Of all the old ships.
I mean, why not, right? You're doing nostalgia so hard anyway. Why not bring on all the other old stuff,
Right. It's a perfect example of Terry Metalis, like, using Twitter to set people straight. There were so many people when they first did the Starfleet Museum that said, oh, that was bullshit. They didn't show the Enterprise, the original Enterprise. And then he was like, oh, no. And then did screenshots that the NX-01 from Enterprise was there. It was just retrofitted the way they had planned to do it in season 5 and never got to, which was pretty darn deep nerdy. The fact that they stole the cloaking device from the Bird of Prey, from the fact I do like that they made the one with the whales canon in universe was great.
Right.
That was fantastic. I admit that the appearance of Voyager and the playing of the theme song actually made me teary-eyed. And so that's where I have to admit that the appearance of a starship made me cry. That is a nerd admission. And the fact, I know it was partially Seven saying that's where I became, that was my home and that's where I became a person. It all worked. The fan service there in the museum was great. I like the idea that Geordi is running the museum, that he would want to be fixing up old ships. But I do wish they had mentioned that he had been a captain on the Challenger, like, and all good things, like, for a little while, because I in my head, the canon of Geordi being captain of the Challenger is important.
Not every career path in Starfleet leads to captain of a ship.
Sure.
Yeah. You have to have the right personality to be a captain. And I am sort of wary of this idea that they all have it, because they don't. They really don't. Like, Geordi wants to be tinkering. That makes more sense to me than him being a captain. I just don't see it.
They did that so well on TNG. There's that episode where Troy was doing like command training, and then realizes she has to like send people off to their death, and she's like, "Nope, that's not."
Oh shit, nope.
Yeah, don't want to do it. So that's a thing. But so let me think if there's anything in the first couple episodes that I know I want to talk about. What did you guys think of Jonathan Frakes this season? I thought he was amazing, and
he's the perfect example of what I mean by the original TNG, the acting and emotions squished down.
Right.
And here they're not.
Yeah. So there's a story that Terry Matalas tells of that when Franks was directing episodes of season 2, and Matalas was writing and like running the writer's room, he told a story about how Jonathan Frakes came up to talk to him in the office, and he said, "Oh, by the way, there's going to be a lot of Riker in this season." And Jonathan Frakes said to him, "I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not a very good actor."
Really? Who are you going to get to play him?
No. Yeah, exactly. And he was like, "I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not a very good actor." And then Terry Matalas said, "I promise you, you can handle this," because he said that his intention was to Franks it up a lot and to bring out more of Franks in Riker. And look,
yes, I'm right here. It's very Frakes.
Yeah. Right.
Guys, I remembered my favorite part of the whole thing. It's when Riker finds Troy in the cell and says Imzadi, and she says, "Should have taught you a different word."
Yeah.
That was so, like, I loved how the show was like, it was nostalgia, but they also were kind of aware of some
I love
stuff.
what she said. "Oh, I could tell he wasn't you."
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He was good in bed and terrible at pizza.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they definitely gave. Now, there was some talk early on, because Marina Sirtis didn't show up in the season until later, that there were some fans that were like thinking that was somehow a slight against her. But and Jerry Ryan, like online, like seriously jumped to the defense of all that and said, "Hey, sometimes actors want their schedule to be the way it is for a reason, and y'all need to back off."
But they used her perfectly. That was the perfect way to bring her into the story, I thought.
Yeah. And doesn't I thought the way that they slowly introduced the characters was good. That it was Riker from the beginning. And first of all, putting Riker back on the Titan. I know they kind of mentioned that it was the same ship retrofitted, and they gave lip service to the novels, and
Elizabeth. They used Elizabeth.
Yes. And Terry Matalas references the novels a couple times and has said on interviews, for example, the fact that it was a Una McCormick novel that established that when Picard left to do the Romulan relocation, that Worf took over command of the Enterprise E. And so him saying that was not my fault, put it into canon that he was the captain of the Enterprise. And put reference to the novels, and also that there was references to the Titan novels. And the fact that, which is interesting too, because it wasn't mentioned, and I was kind of hoping that they would do this, but Tuvok served on Riker's Titan in the novels. So I was kind of hoping that they did that when they had Tuvok come back. And, I did think that just like, oh, everybody's back was kind of convenient. And that was a little bit much. At the same time, I love Tim Russ. I loved him being there, so I can just deal with it. I'll just deal with it, you know.
Well, I thought it made perfect sense to have people calling their friends.
Yes, I loved that scene, and I thought that scene was great. And the changeling Tuvok was chilling. Actually, I thought it worked really, really well.
See, I loved it from that angle, but from another angle, wouldn't you wait until you'd turned off the comms to have that's not Tuvok? You don't want them to know you figured it out.
Yeah.
Instead of her just saying like, "Yeah, I know."
Thank you. Well, let us know if you have any more information. Click.
Yeah.
There's no way,
Well, they wanted to have Tuvok, and I did think it was good to because I thought it was a great performance by Tim Russ to just change on a dime, you know, and say all that stuff. So they would have lost that moment.
Speaking of changing on the dime, Brent Spiner did a great job of that.
Yes.
But I really thought when it came down to the fight between him and Lore for control, they had dropped in that Lal was in there too.
Yeah.
And I thought Lal jumping in on Data's side was where they were going.
Yeah, that would have been
but
great.
They didn't.
Yeah, that was weird.
They may have wanted to, but not found the right actor or whatever, or not being able to find the actor who played Lal. Maybe it didn't work. I don't know. Who knows?
Maybe they're dead. Who knows? But you could have done a voiceover.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought it was also very, the Data Lore stuff was, a lot of this was like, we've seen all of this before, Return of the Jedi, whatever. But I mean, from Star Trek, we've seen all this before. And
do you think Return of the Jedi was the first time they did that? But go on.
Well, but like the Data Lore stuff, when I was watching Data switch personalities between one and the other, I was just like, feel like I've seen this before, like that was almost like a bridge too far for me of just showing us the same thing again instead of showing us a new version of the same thing. But it was fine. It was good.
Yeah, the Data stuff kind of pushed the suspension of disbelief a little bit for me, and I love that Terry Matalas said, "You will never play another Soong on my watch." Like, I love that Terry Matalas has said, like, listen, I was not going to do that. But at the same time, I couldn't imagine them doing this without Data being there.
No, they needed him. It worked out fine.
I'll be right back.
Yeah. Well, and so, yeah, they couldn't have not done that. And I think, I don't know, Sarah, did you have a most valuable returning character? For me, it was definitely Worf. I thought Michael Dorn just his.
I think that I was actually really happy with the way that they ended Rafi's storyline, and I really appreciated that because the character received so much abuse. I mean, one of the things that drove me so crazy about this reaction is that that Shaw was basically a light version of Rafi. Shaw was just sort of very hardened and had some self-destructive qualities because of what he had been through, had some trauma issues that he was dealing with in not healthy ways. Somehow was still allowed to have his job, and fine, we'll gloss over that. We've done it before in Star Trek. But and so the fact that I remember tweeting like last season, like I really want to make sure that Rafi gets to see her grandchild and is redeemed through all of this. And I thought it was really cool that Worf understood that Rafi's gift is intuition, that because Rafi's gift is intuition, it sort of makes her seem crazy from people around her who confuse her intuition with her way of self-medicating that intuition. I didn't like the fact that she showed up literally a minute before the recruitment center blew up. That was another plot contrivance of Matalas that drove me absolutely up the wall. And I don't mean to disappoint you, David, but I could not continue with 12 Monkeys because they did the same shit. He really loves to make characters act stupid when it serves the plot, Matalas, and it drove me. It's why I stopped watching 12 Monkeys, in addition to not really liking the leads that much. But anyway, I really loved the fact that they tied up Rafi and that she was a significant part of this season, because I really was so mad at the way that they treated her for several seasons. She was a great character. There was a lot of misogyny and a lot of misogynoir directed at her. And even just the fact that, people will be like, well, it's the addiction issue. Yeah. And you know what? I think it's great that they were like, they answered the question, what would addiction look like in the Starfleet world? Because if Starfleet is, again, this Hogwarts organization that controls your every move and prevents you from making your own mistakes, it's not a utopia at all. It's a dystopia. And so the fact that she is allowed to make mistakes and have an addiction, and yet Starfleet is still like, we're still going to give you a roof over your head. But if you are determined to still be addicted and have all these things, that's fine. You're allowed to make that choice. We wish you didn't. Here are some resources if you change your mind. Because that's how we should be treating members of our society who have addiction problems. Here's a roof over your head. Here's the tools that you need if you want to get out of it. But it's up to you whether you want to pursue this. So I really loved everything, the way that they wrapped up Raffi as a character, and the fact that Worf was her biggest defender and understood who she is and what makes her tick.
I love that he said her full name every time.
Yes.
Yeah,
Raffaella. Yeah.
I had to see, this is one of those things where, as these superpowers build up over the years for what they can and can't do medically, you start to wonder why they can't just give someone a shot and they're not an addict anymore, or go and they're not an addict anymore. I mean, it's sort of like the kind of thing you'd think they'd have figured out by then.
But they also new drugs.
I think they can. Like,
So
I think that if she were to go into, for instance, a treatment center, they would probably be able to give her a drug that helps her to not go through withdrawal. But I think that the point that they're trying to make here is that a certain percentage of addicts will want to be addicts. That's part of it, right? So I do think that there are treatment options for those who want to pursue them.
But I think they would just be okay, go home.
Yeah, but they have to want to go in there and do it. That's the thing. And Raffi, I like Raffi as a character. I love that first of all, Michael Dorn and Michelle Hurd, obviously loved working with each other, and they've talked about it. Yes,
I can tell you that much behind the scenes. They did. Yes,
and they in interviews they've talked about it, and they obviously loved working with each other, and those characters were great together. They found a really great way to. I personally love that. Imagine Worf lost the Enterprise E, right, and something happened, and then he's gonna be like, all right, well, I got to do something else, and then he goes and does his warrior monk thing, and then but Starfleet's still gonna be like, hey, Ro obviously comes to her and says like, hey, I need you because you were on the front lines of the Dominion War, and I need you for this project because I'm trying to find these changelings. So I thought it made perfect sense. I love that. I love that he and Raffi worked well together. I liked that we had at least one character from the first two seasons that they wrapped up a storyline and found a good way to work it in with Worf. Now let's talk about. Do you have something you want to say about Raffi, John?
Well, no, I was going to change the subject to something else.
All right, well then let me change the subject to something else, which is
oh please, it's like it's your podcast.
Oh yes, I know. Well, so for me, I was watching this week to week, and I'm Issa, my buddy over here, is refusing to watch it until he can watch it all at once, and I'm having the problem of the morning of the Ro Laren episode, and we're Issa and I are texting about something else, and I'm just like, fuck, dude, I want to tell you, but I can't tell you, and I'm like, holy shit, you got to watch this. For me, the biggest revelation, the biggest jaw-dropping moment for me was that they got Michelle Forbes back, and that they finished the Rose storyline, because it was a dangling thread, and it was one I didn't think that they were going to solve or answer. And for me, as a Deep Space Nine fan and somebody who actually likes Bajoran politics, believe it or not, and all that stuff, the fact that they solved the Rose and the Rose storyline. Ro is one of my favorite characters on Next Gen because she was flawed, and there were so few characters with flaws, and that was my biggest problem with TNG.
Can someone catch me up on what the Ro Picard relationship was? Because I was very confused in that part.
Boy, you didn't remember that one?
I didn't at all.
Okay, so the penultimate episode of Next Gen, like Picard puts Ro in as a spy into the Maquis, and Ro betrays Picard and almost shoots Riker.
I didn't remember that at all. I guess
the phaser on Riker to escape and become a Maquis double. Basically she goes with the Maquis. So yeah,
I don't have any memory of that. Like, that's so weird. Obviously, I saw the end of Next Generation, but I don't recall that at all. So I'll have to go.
You have to rewatch it every 5 years, like the rest of us, Issa.
Jeez. I haven't seen it since it aired.
I also want to point out something. It is in the grand Star Trek well, not Star Trek per se, but let's say in the grand TNG tradition to have the first 2 seasons be comparatively weak.
Yes.
I mean, come on, go back and watch the first 2 seasons of TNG.
Yeah, they're pretty big. I did rewatch. I started rewatching TNG during the pandemic with my wife and our older daughter, and we made it through the first few seasons, and then they gave up. So we didn't watch the whole thing. We were doing like an episode guide, just watch these key episodes, but they got a little more. They're not science fiction.
Well, that's because you should have started at season 3.
There's some stuff you have to see. I mean, I felt like we were watching a pretty good episode guide order, like you got all the key moments in, but they were just bored. And then I think the pandemic ended or something. So then it was like, whatever, there was no chance.
Darn.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, the stupid pandemic was over now. God, it ruined everything. Yeah. No.
So
that's funny. So the Ro thing was not like a big deal to you.
Yeah, I didn't remember it at all. I was like, what are they talking about? And I assumed it was from like some other show that I hadn't seen, but I couldn't figure out what it was. But I didn't remember that from Next Gen at all.
Oh, see, because like for me, as somebody who loved that, who thought that, because that was the one time that Picard really got betrayed by one of his crew. And so he was pissed, he was really, really angry. And so I thought that was so in the context of this season, it was huge that they had Ro come back. And so part of the storyline that makes it so powerful is that Picard didn't want her to wear her Bajoran earring at the beginning.
Right.
So
I remember that.
Yeah, so her giving him the earring was, that's what was great when Riker said this was excellent spycraft. Yeah. And so I loved the whole Ro thing. I thought it was a huge coup that they were able to keep that quiet. That was a big deal. And especially getting Michelle Forbes back after her being such a boss on Battlestar Galactica and playing a villain on that show, basically, right? And so, it was a pretty big deal. And so that, to me, I think the 2 best things of the early part of the seasons was that the episode 4 was with the space babies was such a strong episode. And because I think they did a great job. One of the reasons why that episode worked so well is they ended episode 3 feeling so freaking hopeless. And to have Riker just say, congratulations, you just got us killed, which a lot of people thought was super harsh.
I thought that was way over the top. Like that was so, I was like that.
I didn't buy it.
Character.
He might have said, please get off the bridge or whatever, but I don't think he would have dressed him down like that in front of the entire crew. It was just, I felt like it was one of those plot contrivance moments that Metalis, I feel like, does, where he just sort of has people act slightly out of character in order to advance the plot along.
I would agree with you, except they did a great job in the episode of having Riker like push back against Picard multiple times. And then when he finally is like, fine, I'll do your plan. And the fact that the portal weapon like caused that, it backfired. and Picard's plan backfired. I could see why Riker would be pissed at that moment. I actually thought of, I could see why you don't like it. It worked for me.
I felt like that whole section where it was like the authority on the ship and Shaw was really mean to the legends. Like none of that landed for me. Like I was like, this all seems.
Well, it makes sense later when he gives his speech about how he still has issues with Locutus. And can't really.
Good, but
which was a excellently performed scene by Todd.
Yeah,
that was really good.
The reason why that was, I think, so good is that basically, and you got to give that guy credit, because at the beginning of the season, everyone's like, who is this asshole? Fuck him. And the fact that by the end, when he dies, everyone's like, we're going to riot. It showed that they had an evolving character.
It showed that they can only have that level of empathy for men who look like them. But I digress.
I'm gonna jump to the end of Picard here because I have to cut out in about 3 minutes.
Okay.
Two things bothered me about the end. First of all, you're never going to top the end of Save the Whales when Kirk and crew come up on the Enterprise A. Now it seems they've replaced the Enterprises so quickly and so fast that it sort of started to lose all meaning. I wanted them to make it the NCC 1701 Picard. Because that would have been, but also in that scene where she says, where at the very end where Seven says to Jack, you'll be the special ship's counselor.
Right.
I just did not work. Yeah. Partly because what I, in my heart, wanted her to say was, oh, yes, you're the ship's mascot.
Yeah.
You're the ship's mascot. Because I listened to how many times you said you were willing to be turned over to the enemy. So when that happens again, which it will, you're up. But no, the actual position he should have had was yeoman.
Yeah. Or go to a science station ensign Crusher, over there.
He has medical training. I don't know why he'd be on the bridge at all. But again, because he's Picard's son, they do want to have him on the bridge. I get that.
As my friend Keith DeCanada wrote in his review, it's continuing the long tradition in TNG of having a Crusher on the bridge as some sort of made up position just to have him on the bridge.
Right.
All in all, it was a very good season. I'll come back some other time if you'll have me and talk about Strange New Worlds which is very strong, but did at least one thing that I think is atrocious. So I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger.
Was it the fairy tale?
Sorry?
Was it the fairy tale episode or something different?
No, that was just bad.
Yeah.
It was just their attempt to do a holodeck episode.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, John, it was nice meeting you.
It was nice meeting you all. Thank you so much for the invitation.
I'll
try and show up on time with clothes on next time. And Sarah, I have to ask you, why does your dog do duck imitations?
Duck imitations? Like
it was
quack,
going
quack, duck?
There was some regular quacking earlier.
Yeah.
She's very confused. She's some kind of mystery mutt. We have no idea. She could actually be part duck. I don't know. But she's a very cat-like dog, and she's very neurotic. So makes sense.
Okay. All right. So for the rest of the crew, we have about 15 more minutes. Let's go through the end of the season. John, thank you for joining us, at least for as long as
you're very welcome.
And I always love to talk to you. And again, thank you for all your work in the 90s. I love your era of Star Trek books. To me, it's the best era. So
to me too.
Yeah, I know.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
But so for this crew, we still need to talk about the end. What did you guys think about the reveal of the Enterprise D? I tried to get Dano to come on this episode, but the morning that appeared, he sent me a text that said, because this is what he always says about the bridge at the Enterprise D. He said the Holiday Inn Express bridge is back, which cracked me up. I thought, look, it was a cool reveal. I kind of guessed when they did the museum and they said they had on Twitter, people were saying because they hinted that there was something going on in Hangar Bay 12. So there was a degree that I was like, is it gonna be the Enterprise? But they could have just as easily taken any of the ships. And I do like what John said about it. It would have been cool to have all the ships come back. However, for me, and they could have fixed this very easily, it was very hard for me that, all right, 5 of us are going to run this ginormous ship by themselves.
I was thinking that the whole time. It's like, why did you have a crew before?
And they kind of said the thing about, I got drones down there, and they could have solved it with Geordi could have had a crew from the museum who was ready to go, and then just had like a skeleton crew, but just had a few people, just have somebody down in engineering, something like it would have. I just had the hardest time with that. It was just like the transporting to Kronos in Star Trek Into Darkness. It just broke me a little bit.
Well, and why would they have more than a few? They said, oh, we only have a few weapons. And then they went on and just apparently had an endless supply of weapons.
Right.
Right.
And again, I wouldn't care about a lot of these nitpicks if the fanboys were not losing their fucking minds with
saying
just
how perfect it
jizzing
was.
all over. Right. And it's just like, come on, guys.
Exactly.
Have a little self-awareness.
Yes. Yes. And so, I do think the scenes were really well played when they were, and they obviously let them improv. I'm pretty sure it was an improv, like Patrick Stewart's line about the carpet, and which was
well.
great.
Here's the thing about that. What I love about the carpet scene, and a lot of other little moments like that, is that we've started to break the fourth wall in that there are a lot of things in all 3 seasons that were more about Star Trek as it exists in the culture than Star Trek within its own interior thing. And I actually really like that they do that. For example, I think that Siobhan is particularly sensitive to how Patrick Stewart is perceived by fans as this kind of father figure, and that Elnor represented the fans. Elnor represented the, sort of, I love you, you don't know who I am, you don't care about me thing. And I feel like they play with things like that, and they play with things like the carpeting thing. The carpeting thing was a big runtime joke on Star Trek shitposting, where I talked about this in terms of Lower Decks, where I feel like there are definitely writers for Star Trek who lurk those groups. And the carpeting thing has been a joke in that group for a long time. And so to see that was like, they're breaking the fourth wall in a really lovely way. But in a very serious way, I'm really glad that we have Jack Crusher. I'm so glad, because I don't think I could handle the loss of Patrick Stewart. Like I will be straight up mourning for months. I'll be wearing black, the whole thing, when he finally perishes at 147.
How will we know the difference?
All right. Well, but like, and I love the fact that they're giving us this character that means that whether, obviously this show is going to happen. I don't know whether it'll happen right away. They might want to do movies first. They might want to, tease out the way that he's introduced and the way that they pick up his thread. But I think it's pretty safe to say, given how the viewership numbers are so strong for this season, with all the fucking petitions out there, that we're going to get a series with Jack Crusher.
Dude, you got to give Terry Matalas credit. He backdoor piloted the shit out of that, of what he wanted.
It was funny because I had no idea that was coming. Like I hadn't read anything about it. I didn't know there was going to be another show or anything like that. But I knew
it was coming.
I was suspicious by how much screen time that bridge crew was getting. I was like, they're getting a strange amount of screen time. I wonder if they're trying to like make these characters into something, and of course they were. So that was
Well, part of the whole thing is that they were trying to set up the whole, the fact that the theme of the original show was called The Next Generation, and having the idea that their age was the thing that saved the day for the young people was the theme, and that was, they started backwards from that concept. Terry Metalis has said that they wanted their age to save the day, and the joke about I've never been so happy to see so many wrinkles, which was a great joke, for Marina Sirtis. So before we get into we'll get into more of the Star Trek Legacy thing in a little bit, but as far as all the legacy characters, I think everybody got something and did well. That I think Gates McFadden was great. Beverly Crusher was amazing in this season. Like, her intro to the season was great, even though they fridged her for a little bit. But she scienced the shit out of everything that in the story. The setup of her like lying to Picard or ghosting everybody was a little weird, but I think she was great. I think LeVar Burton, they all kind of had rough starts, but I definitely think Michael Dorn was the MVP of the. Michael Dorn and Jonathan Frakes were the MVPs, but Gates McFadden and Marina Sirtis, all, Brent Spiner, they all did great. They all did great. Now, for me, that meant from the beginning, like throughout the promotion process, Jonathan Frakes and a couple other, Patrick Stewart has said, well, maybe we could do more. My personal feeling is let it go. You got a good ending. Be over. If Star Trek Legacy, if you want to have like little cameos here and there, you want to pop up for a storyline, a couple arcs, whatever, do not do a whole nother series of this cast. Let it be a good ending. This is your undiscovered country. This is your great ending. How do you guys feel about that? Because I think it's
I think you can still do, like Chekhov's son was the president, right? Like, I think that kind of stuff you can still do. But I think it is better to let it go and not have the characters. That was a good ending. Like, I don't need to see Data again being lore, whatever. I know that's done, but that was just, I don't mean to nitpick on that because I obviously really enjoy Data. But the Stranger Things theme song, where did that come from? Like the Stranger Things synth, did you guys notice that? Like, that drove me crazy. I was like, why is this in here? That was very strange.
I did not notice that, but
okay,
I didn't notice that at all.
There are like 2 times where they have some riff that sounds exactly like the Stranger Things theme, and that was just really weird. It was like this 80s synth heavy bass line kind of thing. Okay, whatever. I'm a music nerd too. So yeah, I thought it was a great ending. I mean, obviously at some point they need to stop using the TNG characters, but I mean, that's a good way to go out.
Yeah. And I mean, I would watch the hell out of a Worf Rafi show being spies, but they're obviously not going to do that. They went another direction with that. But if they had done that, I would have watched the hell out of
I would be I think that Section 31 is the perfect fit for Worf because he wants to do the beheadings, right? But he also has this Zen quality that makes the combination of the two hilarious. I think that they are setting him up to be in the Michelle Yeoh Section 31 movie.
That would be amazing, actually. Would be, because she could go. She's stepping into the Guardian of Forever, so she can go anywhere. Yeah. She can go anytime. So, and what?
I mean, they said that it's going to be a Section 31 movie, so
yeah,
could
be. So we talked about the Enterprise reveal. Yeah, I mean, because it makes sense that the only the saucer, it's only the saucer section of the original ship, the rest straight up blew up. So the bottom half is another ship, which, by the way, shout out to the USS Syracuse, a city I used to live in. that the bottom of the ship is apparently the USS Syracuse. So shout out. So what happened to the saucer section of the Syracuse? I wonder. But I thought, yeah, the museum thing and all the starships was great. Now the setting up of the I agree. I would have been fine with Star Trek Legacy still being the Titan, and I didn't need it to be the Enterprise, but I understand the decision. And the emotional thing about that is, as a fan of Voyager, who was not instantly in love with the character of Seven of Nine, but eventually did fall in love with the character of Seven of Nine, to see that character go from assimilated Borg, ripped from the collective, to a bisexual captain of the Enterprise is a fucking awesome journey, and they earned it. And they took her, in my opinion, by going through all these steps and like having her character go through these things. It would have made more sense to have Janeway do it than Tuvok. But at the same time, I understand that they probably asked Kate Mulgrew, and she probably said no. But
wasn't there an article about it that said that they just did not have the budget? They just could not afford to bring back that many people.
Well, that's what they're saying.
I thought I saw that.
Yeah, but who knows? But Tuvok, they did have a relationship on the show, and Jerry Ryan seems like every time she talks about Tim Russ, she gets all like excited. So she obviously had a connection to him as an actor. Yeah. And by the way, Tim Russ is a star nerd and an astronomy nerd who goes to dark sky events all over Southern California with all of his rigs. So I got mad respect for Tim Russ. And
that's adorable.
And apparently I had been at a Sky party with him and didn't know it. Yeah. And I may have even like looked through his telescope, and just because you don't necessarily talk to everyone, you just kind of walk around and do your thing. And I had a friend tell me, he was like, oh yeah, Tim Russ was here tonight. He had his setup. He was looking at star clusters all night. Just like,
you're telling me this now? Like probably a good thing that you didn't know, right?
I would have been cool.
Oh yeah, it would have been.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, he's Tuvok. It's not like it's Leonard Nimoy, right?
Sure.
Okay, he's pretty cool. Yeah. Anyways, so my point is that I didn't need for it to be the Enterprise, but I understand that if you're going to do a new series set in the early 25th century, and they haven't announced everything, and Terry Matalas has been very political about saying no announcements have been made. It's just a dream for me. But as successful as it's been, they would be crazy not to greenlight a 7 Raffi Star Trek Legacy with Jack Crusher on the crew. They've done everything to set it up. Like, it would be awesome. And I like the idea that it's not the biggest, hugest, most flagshipy ship of the Enterprise, that it's kind of like it would be a different position, and it would just be respect for what they did, that they named it the Enterprise, whatever. Anyways, but obviously the Enterprise, F and Shelby did not have a good day there. But that was also cool to bring back Shelby. That's a deep Easter egg. She was only in one episode of TNG, right?
2 technically.
2.
Yeah, she was in the season finale and then the season premiere. Because remember that whole summer we had to fucking wait to find out what happened.
Right. And I will say this for Shelby, and John was the one who did this, and he's gone. But they created the New Frontier novels, John and Peter, and there's like 10 or 12 of those novels, and she's the first officer and takes command of the Excalibur, and that's the ship in the New Frontier books. And and she's a major character in all those books. So if people haven't read those, they're really good. Peter David was one of the best Star Trek novelists working back then. And apparently, by the way, going through some serious health issues, and because he's an author, doesn't have health care. So if you look up Peter David, there is a GoFundMe for his healthcare stuff. So since we're talking about it, I should mention that. And Peter David also wrote some of the best Q novels during that era of Star Trek. So just shout out to those. But anything else you guys have any thoughts about this idea of Star Trek Legacy and doing the new show? Sarah, I mean, I understand your feelings about the Metalis fandom thing, but
I actually give him a pass about naming it Enterprise, because if you're going to do a next generation reboot of sorts, and you're going to have some legacy characters involved, I mean, that would be the most natural fit, right? It would be the most natural fit for guest stars to show up for. And I loved that, even though some of you did not like how much time they gave to the Picard Jack relationship, I appreciate the fact that they did that, because they're not going to have another opportunity to do that pretty much ever, unless there is another TNG focused film or something like that. And so I really appreciate the fact that they gave you a really good solid character study with the two of them getting to know each other. Because I would have hated if all that happened was sort of, oh, that happened off screen while they all solved this.
As long as Legacy is not these season long end of the universe every time. They got to take the Strange New Worlds path.
I'm very worried that I don't want them to necessarily do Strange New Worlds, but I am very worried about the Marvel-esque of Star Trek. I am a very casual fan of Marvel for a reason. Most of the Marvel films are disposable. You watch them once and then it's done. Like, I loved Black Panther. I loved Ragnarok. That's basically it. And I feel like Star Trek should use restraint. And again, this comes down to the homogenization thing that's happening, right? Like, oh, well, because that is popular over there, let's copy them. No. Carve out your own fucking identity. You're Star Trek. You're your own franchise. You do your own thing. You don't need to fucking do what they're doing over there, because then everything starts to look the same. And I hate it. And everything starts to sound the same. Like, let them have their own identity. You have yours. And maybe, so I would love it if they actually had, season long plots, but don't have it be universe ending season long plots, because I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the constant drama.
Because the thing is, if Discovery had done a season long arc about the rebuilding of the Federation, that's a story worth telling, and the universe isn't ending, but it's a story worth telling over a season.
Well, I think that's what they're going to do with Starfleet Academy.
Yeah,
I think that they have that planned.
I think it's a mistake to be concerned about whether it's a season-long arc or episodic or whatever. As long as it's good, you can get away with either, as long as it fits. That's really all that.
That's true.
I mean, the only reason that it bothers you that every season is like a escalating universe-ending thing is because it just wasn't as good as it could have been, right? If it had been better, you'd be like, this is awesome.
I think I think Discovery actually did the best among those that pattern. I think Discovery is the one that did the best with that.
Season 2, I thought.
Discovery is incredibly epic. And it was so funny
we've all talked about Discovery and how David and I thought it peaked before they went to the future or whatever.
No,
the only reason why I like season 3 and 4. That's not the issue. It's that I think they told the wrong stories there, because
I agree.
Because the thing is, I think the rebuilding of the Federation is more interesting than the burn. It's how they resolved it wasn't great, but I like Discovery. I'm not talking shit on Discovery. I love Discovery. I'm sad that we only get one more season, and I hope it goes out with a bang. But that being said, I just think, I don't know. I just don't think the whole universe has to be on the line each time, partially because it's like, well, first of all, the the major problem with Picard that not enough people are talking about with Picard season 3 is that it has kind of the same ending as Prodigy, right? Like the linked ships and the formation like thing, like they should have learned their lesson after the events of Prodigy, right? They should have, if we're in the same timeline, we've been like, oh, maybe linking all of our ships together is not a good idea, because remember
Well,
that
the changelings were the ones who tricked Starfleet into doing that, right?
well, that's the argument that you can make, and that's fine, and I can live with that story wise. But of all the nitpicking, that's the least of my concern. I'm honestly more concerned about the 5 people running the Enterprise. Like, makes my skin crawl a little bit. So yeah, but hey, Carrie's home, so it's a good time to start wrapping up.
All right.
But here's the thing. So what do you guys so next we have Strange New Worlds season 2 coming in June. So the next 2 things that Star Trek has are Strange New Worlds, and we have, after that we have, I think maybe no, Discovery is coming after that, or maybe it's, I don't know.
I have a theory that they're not actually canceling Discovery, because I think that you know, they originally had 7 seasons planned, right? That's what they said. They originally had this whole thing, and so this would be what, the 5th season, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
I really think that they might be, because Kurtzman announced that they were doing the Section 31 movie with Michelle Yeoh. Then a week later, he actually mentioned, he said, actually, I would like to do a Star Trek movie, full-length movie, once a year. And that, to me, suggests that they might tell the rest of that story with Discovery.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah. Or
also, it depends how popular season 5 is. I think that'll change a lot of things too. So, you know.
Well, and also, you know, Trekkies have a long history of deciding that they suddenly love a Star Trek series that has been canceled or that's off the air, right? I think that is sort of what makes Trekkies sort of warm up to it. I think it takes them a while, some of them, and they do this thing where when it's the new thing, they're like, oh, we hate it. And they did this with TNG. And then when it's no longer the new thing and there's another new thing to hate, they're like, oh, we love that show. We never talked bad about that show. What are you talking about?
Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm excited that they're doing one-off movies for streaming, and I think that can expand the Star Trek universe, because you could do things that you couldn't do otherwise. Like, you could do a Worf adventure here and there, or you know, Dr. Crusher story that's like a one-off, and I think that's great. You know, and at the popularity of these, you know, they're seeing the popularity of these TNG characters, they're gonna get one-offs here and there. So, all right. Well, we've gone for a while here, so I think it is a good time to wrap up. But overall, I love the season. I super enjoyed it. To me, the 2 highlights were episode 4 and the Ro Laren thing, which meant nothing to Issa, which is really funny.
No, I really liked it.
You should have messaged me, because I was all about it. I was I watched God.
it like yesterday, right? So,
yeah.
But no, I didn't remember the details. I remembered Ro Laren. I didn't remember the details of the falling out at the end. But I enjoyed her. I wish they'd used her more. Like, it seemed very short, and she seemed like she died in a really stupid way. Like, she should have been more suspicious or whatever. But you know, I really enjoyed it.
Well,
she should have been more suspicious. She was one of the few people who understood what was going on.
Yeah, exactly. And she got the information to Picard, so she helped save the galaxy. So, yeah, good on her. So, let's hear it for Starfleet rehabilitation. Because you know, I didn't have a problem with Maki, but you know, a lot of people did. So whatever, you know. But yeah, so hopefully we'll be doing episodes about Star Trek Legacy in the future. And we'll see. But yeah. So Star Trek Picard. Sarah, where can people find you if they want to find you, if they want to talk to you about these things? Do you
Probably
want them to find
Facebook.
you?
It's funny, I left Twitter as soon as Elon Musk took over. I was like, fuck this shit. And I think it was when he decided he was gonna let the Orange Menace back on. And then I've been missing it only because of the Star Trek conversations. I'm like, damn it. Like the fact that Terry Matalas is out there answering questions, I wouldn't know that because I haven't been on Twitter since I quit my Twitter. So
Yeah, I don't know
now
how he
I'm
does
all,
it. I don't know how he does it because he's more patient than I would ever be.
so I have
Because
questions for him.
we should get back on just for that. Well, he responds to a lot of things. He's not responding to. We forgot to talk about Laris. He has not responded to the Justice for Laris thing.
Maybe that means that they have a plan for her, because I feel like if they didn't have a plan for her, they
Why did
would
they
be
mention
more
it?
likely to say, right,
Yeah, why did they
I'm very
mention like
interested.
I'll be waiting for you if
Right.
you're not going to show him showing up? So there's some hilarious memes about Chateau Laris because possession is 9/10 of the law in Romulan society. So there's all these jokes about how she's running Chateau Laris now, and it's
Yeah.
but yeah, I do not understand that, but we did talk about Laris a little bit. We did talk about that. So,
Yeah.
Issa, do you want anyone to find you?
I was never on Twitter in the first place. I'm not a fan. I don't understand it at all because I'm just old, apparently. But you can find me somewhere if you try. It's really easy to find me. You don't want to talk to me about Star Trek, though. So, if you didn't hear it here, you don't need to hear it. It's not important. So.
Well, hopefully soon we're going to be doing the Star Wars Jedi Council about Mandalorian and Bad Batch. If we can convince you to watch Bad Batch,
I will never make it through Bad Batch. Like I've been trying to watch it for a long time. I'm still on episode 1. I just busy schedule, but I will watch The Mandalorian. That's probably the next thing I'm going to watch now that Picard's over.
All right. Well, I think you should watch Bad Batch. It gets really good. But
I believe you. I need to if I'm ever on like a vacation and have a long plane ride where I can't work or something, then I'll do it. Startup life. I'm busy. It's hard to get.
Sarah, can we meet your doggy real quick?
This is the mystery mutt.
Yeah, she's very cute. All right. On that note, we'll end on Luna. Folks, if you want to talk Star Trek with us, we're trying. You can find me. Well, I'll talk about Star Trek all day. So, and hopefully, I know we'll be back for Strange New World. So, see everybody with Strange New World Season 2. And until then, live long and prosper and all that. And we'll talk again.